The silent passenger. A few years ago, late one stormy night, a woman named Alice was driving down an empty highway. She had just finished a long shift at work and was eager to get home, but the rain was relentless, turning the road ahead into a slick, dark ribbon of asphalt. Her headlights barely cut through the sheets of water pouring down, and the windshield wipers moved furiously, struggling to keep her view clear. Alice squinted, gripping the wheel tighter. The radio was off, the silence inside the car broken only by the rhythmic thudding of the rain and the wipers. She was exhausted and knew she needed to stay focused. This road was notorious for accidents, especially on nights like this. As she passed an old gas station, something caught her eye. Standing by the road, illuminated briefly by her headlights, was a figure. A woman, drenched from head to toe, her long hair matted against her face. She was waving, trying to flag Alice down. Alice's heart skipped a beat. There was no one else around for miles, and this woman looked like she was in serious trouble. Without thinking, Alice pulled over. She hesitated for a moment, her fingers tapping nervously on the steering wheel. Something about the woman seemed off, but Alice couldn't just leave her there in the rain. The woman approached the car, her steps slow and deliberate. Alice rolled down her window a crack. "Are you okay? Do you need a ride?" Alice asked, her voice barely audible over the pounding rain. The woman nodded slowly, her face hidden behind the wet strands of hair. She didn't say a word. Alice unlocked the passenger door, and the woman climbed in without a sound, water dripping onto the seat and pooling around her feet. The car was suddenly filled with a damp, cold chill that made Alice shiver. She glanced at her new passenger, trying to make conversation to ease the tension. "Where are you heading?" Alice asked. The woman remained silent, staring straight ahead, her hands resting limply in her lap. Alice felt a pit of unease growing in her stomach. Something about the woman felt wrong, but she couldn't place what it was. The silence stretched on, and the car's interior felt more claustrophobic with each passing minute. As they drove deeper into the night, Alice tried to ignore the creeping fear building inside her. She kept glancing at the woman, hoping she would say something, anything, but the woman just sat there, completely still, her head slightly turned towards the window. Alice noticed her clothes didn't seem right, they were outdated, almost like they were from another time. The road twisted and turned through the countryside, and the rain continued to pour down, almost like it was trapping them in a never-ending tunnel of darkness. After what felt like an eternity, Alice couldn't take the silence anymore. "Where exactly do you need to go?" she asked again, her voice more insistent this time. Without turning her head, the woman slowly lifted one hand and pointed up ahead, towards a narrow, dirt road leading off the highway. The road was barely visible in the storm, lined with tall trees that seemed to lean in, creating a canopy of shadows. Alice hesitated. The dirt road looked abandoned, and her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she had come this far. She turned onto the road, the tires slipping on the wet mud as they made their way deeper into the woods. The trees loomed overhead, their branches clawing at the sky like twisted fingers. After a few minutes, they approached an old, dilapidated house at the end of the road. It looked like no one had lived there for years. Boards were nailed haphazardly over the windows, and the front porch sagged under the weight of time. The wind howled through the trees, and Alice felt a deep sense of dread wash over her. The woman finally spoke, her voice low and raspy, barely a whisper. "This is where I live." Alice's heart pounded. "Are you sure? This place looks abandoned." The woman didn't respond. Instead, she slowly turned her head to face Alice for the first time. And that's when Alice saw it. The woman's face was pale and gaunt, her skin stretched tight over her bones. Her eyes were hollow, black pits that seemed to swallow the light. Her lips curled into a slow, unnatural smile. Alice gasped and recoiled, her hands gripping the steering wheel. Her mind raced, panic taking over. Before she could react, the woman leaned in close, her breath cold against Alice's ear. "You shouldn't have stopped," she whispered. Without thinking, Alice slammed on the gas, her tires spinning wildly in the mud as the car lurched forward. She didn't dare look back. The woman's presence seemed to fill the car, a suffocating darkness that pressed in on Alice from all sides. The road twisted back onto the highway, and Alice sped away, her heart pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short, frantic bursts. When she finally dared to glance at the passenger seat, the woman was gone. The seat was empty, not a trace of water or mud where she had been sitting. It was as if she had never been there at all. Alice pulled over to the side of the road, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. She tried to make sense of what had just happened. Had she imagined it? Was she losing her mind? But then, in the rearview mirror, she saw it, a faint outline of the woman standing in the middle of the road, her hollow eyes staring back at Alice. And this time, the smile was wider, more twisted. Alice screamed and sped away, the image of the silent passenger burned into her mind forever. The aftermath. Alice never spoke of that night to anyone. She quit her job shortly after and moved far away, trying to forget what had happened. But sometimes, late at night, when the rain pours down and the roads are empty, she thinks she sees her again.